Poverty's not a choice, it's a trap. And the way out isn't what you think. Stop. Forget everything you know about poverty. In this episode, we're going to challenge our assumptions and discuss the traps that keep millions stuck in a cycle of desperation. We'll start out with a story about an 11-year-old girl named Dasani. I want to read an excerpt from an article from the New York Times written by Ruth Fremson, December 9th, 2013, and the title is Invisible Child. Quote, "She wakes to the sound of breathing. The smaller children lie tangled beside her, their chests rising and falling under winter coats and wool blankets. A few feet away, their mother and father sleep near the mop bucket they use as a toilet. Two other children share a mattress by the rotting wall where the mice live, opposite the baby, whose crib is warmed by a hairdryer perched on a milk crate. Slipping out from her covers, the oldest girl sits at the window. Mornings like this, she can see all the way across Brooklyn to the Empire State Building, the first New York skyscraper to reach 100 floors. Her gaze always stops at that iconic temple of stone, its tip pointed celestially, its facade lit with promise. It makes me feel like there's something going on out there," says the 11-year-old girl named Dasani. Never one for patience, this child of New York is always running before she walks. She likes being first, the first to be born, the first to go to school, first to make the honor roll. Dasani's own neighborhood, Fort Greene in Brooklyn, is one of the gentrification's gems. Her family lives in the Auburn Family Residence, a decrepit city-run shelter for the homeless. It's a place where mold creeps up walls and roaches swarm, where feces and vomit plug communal toilets, where sexual predators have roamed and small children stand guard for their single mothers outside filthy showers. It's no place for children. Yet Dasani is among 280 children at the shelter. Beyond its walls, she belongs to a vast and invisible tribe of more than 22,000 homeless children in New York, the highest number since the Great Depression. Nearly a quarter of Dasani's childhood is unfolded at Auburn, where she shares a 520 square foot room with her parents and 7 siblings. Our topic for today is poverty traps. I'm Todd, and I'm here with James. Hello, James.
Good morning. Wow, that was a heavy start to a podcast.
Yeah, but it's our first episode of 2025, and last year we talked about the lottery and stuff like that, and it piqued my interest to just delve into poverty traps. And so that's how we settled on this topic for today's episode.
It's going to be interesting, I think. So as we get started here, can you tell us what is our definition with poverty traps?
Yeah, set the table. I mean, poverty trap, we're talking about things that are economic and environmental circumstances that reinforce each other and just perpetuate poverty over generations. So that's what we mean by poverty traps.
Okay, that makes sense where folks are actually getting trapped. But for myself, many times when you hear of very deep poverty, we tend to think of third world nations. But what does that really mean here in America?
We have poverty traps here in America despite our affluence. Whether you live in the city, small town, or a rural area, there are some things that work in tandem to keep people impoverished. I mean, we do have poor people in America. Maybe not at the level of poverty as third world nations, but there are things where we see people that are poor comparatively, and they're stuck in these cycles. Let's just look at some of these things that keep people trapped. And I would just submit, one of the first things that I think about is consumer spending. When you think about poor people, I came from poverty, and I've seen this myself. Poor people scrounge money, purchase expensive things like cars, electronics, iPhones, clothes even, that they can't afford. Making payments on this stuff is a financial pit. I think that our advertising here in America, it just helps create this demand for more stuff. So as you're spending on stuff, you don't have much left over for basic needs in some cases. And then the thought of saving for retirement is just far from people's minds because of that consumer spending.
Very consumer-focused society with so much advertising.
Right. And people want to come here to enjoy what we have with all of our stuff. And I just kind of look at consumer spending as a trap. It just keeps us poor. And, there's poor and then there's broke. I guess most of the people that we see driving around in fancy cars, these are broke people. They don't have any spare money. When we talk consumer spending, I'm talking about people that don't have money to begin with. They're not trying to portray a lifestyle. I'm talking about really poor people. They're still going out of their way to scrounge money to buy an iPhone or something like that. Not that they shouldn't. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't do that, but I just see that consumer spending as a trap, and the advertising feeds into that. This is what got us on the topic of poverty traps, gambling and the lottery.
Yeah.
We talked about it. the government and casinos, they sell dreams. And then we talked about poor people who play the lottery regularly. They're pumping 6% of their annual income into the lottery, whether it's scratch off tickets or buying tickets trying to win the Mega Millions. That becomes a trap. And I think about some family members that I know that are putting Social Security money into casinos and lottery tickets and things like that. So what happens is you take that money and put it into the lottery because you're hoping against hope that you might win someday. And some do, but 99.9% of people don't win big in the lottery. They're just pumping their money into it. Again, there's more advertising to keep people playing. Oh yeah, this person won $100 million.
And, here in North Carolina, they just legalized the online gambling stuff. And so now we're pelted with more ads. It used to be just the North Carolina lottery, the government lottery. Now it's all the gambling sites as well.
Right. Yes, come in as well. And so again, it's the government taxing our vices. And now if for people that are middle class that have spare money that they can dump into this, okay, that's cool. But really it negatively impacts the poor. And people that just don't have money to begin with, it's almost like a desperation move when you're putting your money into these tickets and stuff, hoping that you're going to win. And I don't like that. And I see our government advertising to that, and they're advertising in poor neighborhoods. That's the thing that I really dislike about gambling and the lottery. So not cool. And then we have predatory lending. I'm talking about check cashing, payday loans, pawn shops. You don't see these in affluent areas because the rich people, they don't need that. And it's insane. Predatory lending.
Yeah. I have a very recent thing that happened that I will share. Our oldest son just got a credit card, and he had a thing where if you get our credit card, they'll give you some money back if you spend some money. But the most interesting part of it was they asked him as part of the application process, well, how much do you make? And so he told them. So then he finishes the application process and you're like, okay, you're approved. We'll send you a credit card. And your credit limit is exactly what he made last year.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. Really? You're going to give some, it's like their total salary for last year is now their credit limit.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like danger.
Yes.
And fortunately, being in our household, we drilled this into them. You don't pay interest on credit cards.
Right.
You figure out something else.
Right.
Because that is a huge pit to start digging into.
Right.
And
yeah.
So,
I think about young Marines when I was a sergeant, and these young Marines come out of boot camp and they've got all these credit card companies, used car lots, and all the advertising and stuff. And it's almost like they're targeting these young military members. And just a funny story. I mean, used car lots around military bases, they will give you a car at 24% interest and way overcharge you for it, knowing you can't make the payments on it. And your payment and insurance is more than you make in a month. They're still going to do it. And then what happens is they know they're going to have to come repossess that car. So they've got this system set up. They come repossess your car. So you're essentially just renting the car for a short time, and then they just sell it to another military member. But down at Camp Lejeune one year, the commanding general, he knew the game. He saw what was happening. And he made a rule, no more tow trucks can come on base. It was great. So all these used car lots are selling these cars. These young Marines would not be able to make the payments. They would just leave the cars on base. So the used car lots would be just out of luck. I thought that was poetic justice. But yeah, predatory lending, man, that's something that keeps people down. Because if you're in a desperate situation and you got to go pre-cash a check that they'll hang on to for a week until after your payday, you're getting your paycheck and you're already behind the 8 ball. So predatory lending, that's a poverty trap. Then welfare. Now, this is a political topic when we talk welfare, but our goal, our podcast is not to get political. We just want to talk about the problems and then discuss potential solutions without bringing politics in it. Welfare, honestly, when you talk to people that are on welfare, they often find that welfare pays more than a day job. And so common sense just dictates, hey, if I go get a job, I'm going to make less than what I would make on welfare. And I'm thinking about my sister, Penny. She graduated from college, and then her first job was she was a social worker for a local municipality. And she literally went into that looking to help people. Her mindset was, hey, let's help people get out of poverty. So her job was helping people find jobs. She found that, hey, it pays better just to be on welfare. And so it was a short tenure in that job. Let's just say that. But welfare, it's a trap because you get that guaranteed paycheck coming in and it's hard to go get a job and give up that paycheck. And the welfare, I consider that a poverty trap.
Yeah. And there seems like there could be some healthy discussions around ways to help that, to help people find jobs and support their families without relying on welfare. But
Right.
it makes perfect sense. It's like if you've got a steady check coming in where you can buy your groceries and gas, man, giving that up is hard. You got your family at home you're wanting to support. It makes sense.
Yeah, I was born in a rural area of North Carolina, and the industry kind of died out and the jobs just weren't available. And you can't just, as a poor person, decide, I'm going to pick up and move to somewhere where there are jobs. You just don't have the money to do that. And honestly, there's a lot of people on welfare in that area that I came from. And I don't go in there thinking that I should tell them, hey, you need to get off welfare.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, there's a check available to you, and not just reality. It makes physical sense. If you're a CIO, your own little private company, and you don't have a job, you got welfare, and if someone offers you a job that pays less, I'm not going to do that.
So a lot of the stuff we've been talking about so far relates to money and spending. How would you say the poverty traps that are associated with just human behavior?
Yeah. The thing that stands out for me, and this relates to my family history, is addiction. Addiction, once you get hooked on drugs, alcohol, whatever, gambling, food, all of these things, once you have an addiction, it requires money to feed it. And once you're addicted, man, you forget about your kids, you forget about everything, and you're just focused on that addiction. And it just destroys families, and it condemns children to squalor. And then it makes me mad because we got these cartels and gangs that profit off of this misery. That's their goal in life, to profit off the misery and destruction of families. Addiction, man, it's bad. Then when you just pull your attention away from addiction, just family dynamics alone, there are multiple traps associated with this, right? Just generational cycles of poverty where you get in this deep rut of poverty and it's impossible to get out on your own. Think about chaotic relationships and parents fighting one another. And now this is not my family history, but I want to be careful here, but I'm just thinking about friends of mine and people that I know where they face situations with emotional, physical, and even sexual abuse. They face divorce, broken homes, foster care. Now, I feel fortunate that, I came from poverty, but I didn't face a lot of these things that my peers did growing up. Foster care, it's a big one, man. But family dynamics, you get multiple traps associated with that.
Yeah. And how you grow up in the family environment drastically affects your trajectory in life. That's not to say you can't overcome things or folks don't overcome things, but it has immense effect on you, especially as learning about money and the relationship to money.
Right.
Yeah.
Family dynamics.
But what would you say you consider the biggest contributing factor to poverty in America?
Yeah, this is just my opinion. I'm going to throw this out here, but America's culture war is what I say contributes majorly to poverty in America because of this. And I say this from my own experience growing up. The overall messaging that you're getting from society is this. One, the nuclear family, it's oppressive. And so that leads to fatherless homes. And it leads to people being on welfare. And then you have political language where people say things like income inequality. And what happens is that you generate a sense of unfairness amongst people. And you give the people the idea that it's unfair that some people have more than you. And so you get angry. And I remember being angry as a kid thinking, that's not right that these people have this and I don't. And so what happens is, and what I've seen in my own environments, is that people just give up and you think it's not worth it. It's not worth it to, one, graduate from high school. It's not worth it to try to go to school because no matter what you do, you're going to just be poor. That's the mindset. And that's the overall messaging that we're getting from our culture war here in America. And what's the net result? If you're in this situation where you're getting this messaging as a child, you're being programmed with this. You grow up with bitterness, resentment, and then you get this self-centeredness that just sets in like a cancer. And so our kids, they're just growing up deprived of mental and emotional development to say, hey, I can do things and improve my situation. This is just devastating to a child's psyche. And I hate to see that because it happened to me. You have children growing up in these unstable environments and then this messaging that they're getting. You have single moms that are just overwhelmed trying to keep it together. Mom's working, the kids are fending for themselves. And then that alone opens up the door for other traps like addiction, welfare, abuse. And people come in and prey on kids that are alone. This is how kids get trafficked. And we talk about sex trafficking in America. These gangs, these organized criminals, they prey on poor kids that don't have a family to support them. And that's how they lure them away and traffic these children. So the culture war in America, bad agents taking advantage of it. And so there are a lot of factors that lead to poverty here in affluent America.
Yeah, it led with the article, the New York Times article about the young girl, Dasani. It seems like she was impacted by a few of these traps.
Right. And let's circle back to Dasani's story and just look at her family situation. This was a family of 10 people with both parents. She was 11 years old. She was the oldest of 8 kids. And the article describes her as this small, beautiful little girl. She's about 4'8", wiry frame. She wore donated clothes that were brought to the shelter. But every morning she woke up and she had chores that she had to do. She had to change and dress and feed the baby, her little sister Lele. And then she had to check to make sure the formula that the shelter had provided them wasn't expired or spoiled. And she had to clean up their area every morning. That was her responsibility. So she essentially became a sort of surrogate mother to her 7 siblings, helping them get dressed, make their lunches, getting them off to school. And so she developed, as an 11-year-old girl, she had this sense of responsibility for the younger kids in the family. And for her, school became a refuge because there was structure there. There was routine. She had regular food at school. I've seen this happen in my own family. And with myself and my brothers, my mom had to work nights. My dad was over-the-road truck driver. He didn't make that much money. My mom had to go get a job to supplement the income. And so me, my older brother, we ended up being a babysitter to my baby brother because my mom had tried to get babysitters to stay with us, but she worked overnight. That was just difficult. So we ended up caring for my little baby brother. Not the desperate situation that Dasani was in, but I got a little bit of a taste of mom having to work and us having to step up and take care of baby brother.
Yeah. What about Dasani's parents?
Yeah. So Dasani's parents, the author of the article identifies family dysfunction as the primary reason they were homeless because both parents, mom and dad, they were both addicts. Just terrible. They were unemployed. They had a criminal history. And then Child Protective Services, they came in and told the mom, look, you can keep the kids, but you got to stay off crack. So she had a horrible addiction to crack. And the father had spent time in prison for selling drugs. So he had that going on. So there was this constant threat to these 8 kids that they might be taken away from their family, split up, and sent into foster care. They also had this very long wait for public housing. So they're in the homeless shelter that's just living in horrible conditions. Very little hope of getting into public housing. And so the parents, they're dealing with their addictions, but they still promise the children, hey, we're going to save money so that we can leave the state. That was their goal. They're like, we got to get out of New York. And so, yeah, there was this wretched condition, though, of the homeless shelter they lived in, a place called Auburn. And this was a 100-year-old brick building. It was a former hospital. It was turned into a homeless shelter in 1985, and it was referred to as the place of last resort for the homeless. And the homeless people actually dreaded winding up there because of the deplorable conditions. Spoiled food, asbestos, lead paint, rats, roaches, and then sexual misconduct by the staff even. It's just a horrible situation, just constant threats all around you. So at a minimum, Dasani was impacted by her parents' addiction, but I would say family and addiction were the main factors, but there was a lot going on there.
So we see a lot of problems, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of people offering solutions.
Yeah, I would say there are 2 main camps of people that offer up their solutions. Let's talk about the 2 camps and then move on to what may work, but understanding that we're limited in our perspective. But anyway, we've got these pundits and politicians at odds here, and we have a tendency to oversimplify. That's the problem. I become an expert.
Yes.
I think I have a solution, and it's always a simple solution.
Right.
And we make statements like, if we would just do this, the problem goes away, right?
Right, which is not reality at all. And I think, unfortunately, that is played out in a lot of the media that we consume now. It's all sound bites and 30 seconds or 10 seconds clips of people making statements that.
Yes. Yeah. And I heard a Democrat politician come out, and I agree with him. He said this, because he's like, we have this angertainment in America because you got to get ratings. You got to get people to watch your show. So you have to come up with this stuff just to make people mad to keep them tuning in. And that's a problem. Angertainment.
Yeah.
Just not cool, right? There are 2 camps that have cropped up. I've identified this. There may be more. Let's look at Group A. This is the crowd that says, hey, with grit, determination, and self-reliance, you can just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And they want entitlement reform in America. They want time limits on benefits. They want mandatory drug tests. And the theory behind this is that if you remove this safety net, people will be forced to just step up and take care of themselves. But if you think back to Dasani's story and the homeless people in New York City, in 2004, Mayor Bloomberg, a Democrat mayor, he made these sweeping policy changes for New York City. The intent was to, quote, empower the homeless to make them more self-reliant. And what he did was their policies removed priority access to public housing. And instead, they offered temporary help with rent. And so the intended goal was that, okay, we're going to have fewer homeless here. That's the overall goal, because they thought that if you just remove this stuff, people would come out of homelessness on their own. But the actual result is the number of homeless went up. And then 9 years later, after these reforms were implemented, you've got a family of 10 with 11-year-old Dasani in a homeless shelter living in these horrible conditions. So that policy, it didn't do anything. So what I would submit is that these hard-nosed policies to impose self-reliance, they don't account for things like substance abuse, mental illness, hopelessness. I mean, there's just this hopelessness that you get with abject poverty because some people truly are trapped in homelessness.
Yeah. So the opposing folks, what new solutions do you see coming from the other side of things?
Yeah, Group B, I call these the government policy and assistance programs folks. So they look at government economic policy and they say things like, hey, if we just raise the minimum wage, if we make the rich pay more taxes, that's going to help. They advocate for programs to help the poor. So things like education, childcare, universal pre-K, and then also homeless shelters and stuff like that. That's some of their ideas. But this perspective, I would submit, it doesn't account for organizational drift and organizations not meeting the goals. And you just have to look at this lack of results. I mean, the Census Bureau data, looking back since 1965, our poverty rate has stayed about the same. It's just fluctuated between 10 and 15% of Americans are living in poverty. We just see a lack of results there with government programs. So policy and programs, they haven't solved the problem either. And the reason why is these programs just morph into having no purpose other than just sustaining themselves. And everybody jokes about useless government programs, and that's how we coined the phrase self-licking ice cream cone. And they're just all these examples out there. And from my perspective, I look at things like VA healthcare, the Veterans Administration. That is a self-licking ice cream cone that are not serving the veteran community. And then you also think about military weapons development programs for the DoD, right? I'm purposely not talking about entitlement spending. I'm looking at things that, it's not so politically charged. But military weapons development programs, they're not solving the problems. They are self-licking ice cream cones as well, right?
So what would you say that people generally kind of relate to in both those camps?
Well, I would say there's a spectrum. I mean, you can't just say everybody exists over here in this one camp. Most people, they have sympathies with both of those groups. Now, we have a tendency to overcorrect. So if you're trending Group A, the self-reliant crowd, they can be callous and ignore basic immediate needs of people in poverty. And then if you're trending Group B, you see government solutions. You just have to realize government solutions are not accomplishing the mission. So no other purpose than to sustain themselves. And so my take is with both groups, and let me point this out, with both groups, if you're on one side or the other, we have a risk of dehumanizing the poor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to forget that these are autonomous human beings with their own will and ability to act. That's my take.
Yeah. There are no easy answers here.
No.
But so I'm not suggesting we do this, but what about the folks that just sort of throw their hands up and say, let's just give up?
Right. And that's where we just get a dose of reality here. Is there a silver bullet to fix poverty? Nope. And so here's my limited perspective based on my history and the things that I've learned. My family history, both my parents came from very poor conditions where their parents suffered with substance abuse and criminal behavior. On my mom's side, I mean, we're talking about the mountains of North Carolina back in the day. On my mom's side, her dad was a bootlegger in and out of jail, and he was very cruel to my mom. So she ended up dropping out of school in the 6th grade, and she ended up getting married at age 14 to escape her abusive father. She ended up with 4 kids by the age of 20, and her first husband was abusive, and she ended up divorcing him. Thankfully, she had the strength and courage to go, you know what? I'm not dealing with this, and divorce the guy. So she ended up being a single mom working and paying a babysitter before she met my dad. And then on my dad's side, he had an abusive father. also a bootlegger. He dropped out of school in the 10th grade. And at age 15, the relationship with his dad was so bad that he beat up his father with a glass Coke bottle and left home. Never went back. And he ended up marrying my mom when they were in their 20s, and they had 3 kids, and I was the middle child there. So that's kind of the background leading to this. And then my extended family, my dad's family, my mom's family, I had uncles on both sides that were alcoholics and drug addicts. So my parents, they insulated us as best they could. So they knew they needed to keep us away from that. I will forever be thankful for that. Now, my grandmother on my dad's side, she babysat me and my older brother, and my uncles would visit, and they were not nice people. They hated my dad because he refused to support their addictions. So they took it out on me and my brother to get back at him. It was pure evil, but I mean, thankfully, the abuse was limited. These were not good people. So that really messes a little kid up, and it requires therapy and counseling to repair. So that's my family history.
Yeah, it's interesting because my situation was different. My home life is like I grew up poor but didn't know it.
Right.
That's kind of how I described it. But I'm very thankful I kind of didn't know it. I think that helped shelter me from a lot of the things we're talking about here.
Right. Right. But just to dovetail on that, the reason I bring up my family history and my perspective is this. When I hear media personalities and politicians regard the poor as some sort of noble people, that's not the case. I'm talking people that are in poverty. A lot of them are not good people, but they look at the rich as the evil. If you're poor, that doesn't come with some sort of, hey, I'm a Disney character and I'm just this altruistic good person. When you're living in abject poverty and you're surrounded by it, there are a lot of bad people around you. And Dasani's story bears that out, right?
Yeah. So what ideas about poverty did you learn from your experience?
Yeah, my background, my family history, that shaped my views. But then in childhood, here's what I faced. We had those abusive addicts in our extended family, and we viewed the rich with suspicion. And we had envy, bitterness, and resentment. And that was from the messaging we were getting. Now, I lived in a trailer park, and I just regarded anybody that lived in a house that was connected to the ground as suspect. They were rich. And so I grew up looking at my peers in school with suspicion because they lived in houses. I did not like them. And there was this shame associated with being poor. I was ashamed of it. And when you're ashamed and you're down in that dumps of mental just bitterness, you get angry and you look at other people with anger. We just looked at rich people with enviness, bitterness, and resentment, and we just hated them. And it wasn't overt. We didn't just sit around talking about it, but there was just this underlying, we just looked at other people like, ugh, well, they live in that neighborhood over there, so they're suspect. So that's my family. But then for my teachers in school, I honestly liked going to school because I had teachers that really cared for us as students. I think about a guy named Jim Robinson. When I was in the 5th grade, he was like 24 years old. He was just out of college, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and he was our teacher. That guy actually connected with us and talked to us like we were human beings. And he shared things, man. It was good. And then in the 6th grade, there was this lady named Sue Coleman. Love this lady. She was very patient, caring. She genuinely loved us. And she even had us over to her house for like parties and stuff. It was nice. But now some teachers, they reinforced our resentment toward the rich. So there was that messaging. And I just view it as education. So you just grow up in, let's say you're in an academic environment and you just regard rich people are evil. You just pick up these ideas. And some of the teachers, they kind of conveyed that to me as well. So they reinforced what I grew up with as a child. But now one teacher in particular, there was a guy named Bill Cammon. This guy was a World War II Marine infantry veteran who fought in Guadalcanal, Battle of Iwo Jima, and all these other places. I ended up, later in high school, I'd gotten in some trouble. I couldn't play sports. And so I thought my life was over. So I ended up at this small little Christian school where Bill Cammon was the headmaster. And he sought me out. He took me under his wing. He saw me. I was just this bitter, resentful kid. I hated my parents. I complained about them, despite the fact that they did take good care of me. He looked past all of that bitterness and resentment, and he said things to me like, hey, so when you go to college, and I just stop right there. He was talking to me and saying, hey, so when you go to college, I was gobsmacked. I was like, me? Go to college? I just had such a low view of myself. My self-esteem was so low that I thought there's no way I can go to college like some of these rich kids who live in houses with bricks on the front of them. So Bill Cammon, he had such a huge influence on me. And then I ended up going in the Marines because of that. I went infantry as well. And that was such a good decision for me. And I'm thankful for Bill Cammon steering me in that direction. And then as an adult, I ended up going to college. I ended up getting a decent job. And I actually got to interact with the rich that I once hated. And I discovered, you know what? They're not all heartless bastards the way I thought. Some of them treated me like an equal, and they even helped me. They shared knowledge with me. They mentored me. And I found out that what I was told or what I'd grown up thinking, it just wasn't true. So when you think about these politicians and pundits, they're talking about the poor in reverent tones, the noble poor. Nothing noble about poverty. It's a horrible condition. So that's me as an adult finding out that what I believed just wasn't true. And then tempering things with reality of human nature, right? So I had a family member that was an alcoholic. I ended up calling a substance abuse center out in Western North Carolina. I said, hey, look, I got this person I love. I want to help them. I want to pay their way to come through your program. They issued me a reality check. They said, no, we're not going to do that. Because if this person doesn't want to get out of their situation, we can't help them. That's the reality. We can't force people to stay here. We're not going to do it. Best thing you can do is just let that person reach the end of their rope. We're not going to take your money. I was blown away. That's just the reality of human nature.
Yeah. So you can't force people to do something that they don't want to do.
Right.
Period.
No.
So do you then see sort of hope for breaking the cycle?
I do. Yeah. I look at my own life. I came from poverty, and then I had people that spoke to me, that took an interest and shared their time and shared their knowledge with me. And forget about me, but it does happen. You have these feel-good rags to riches stories, especially here in America. So how do we break the cycle of poverty? If I was a dictator king for a day and I could tweak the current situation, here in America, I would seek out a coordinated effort between individuals and nonprofits with some government support. And here are the players here. You got the poor themselves. They have agency and autonomy. They need to have a desire and a will to improve their situation. So that's the poor. That's what they bring to the table. And then you have charitable individuals. I would just recommend people that if you have a heart for this and you want to help people in poverty, interact with the poor, befriend them, volunteer in these organizations, these non-government agencies, people that are helping. Donate your money. So what we need is accountability. These individuals that want to help, we need accountability for ourselves and the organizations that we're involving ourselves in. And the mindset needs to be this: are we helping, hurting, or perpetuating the problem? Because again, government agencies, a lot of times, and also charitable organizations, they become self-licking ice cream cones. Their mission becomes just keep the organization going. That's not a good situation. So if you're a charitable individual, I would say approach it with that mindset. Is this helping, hurting, or perpetuating? And now for nonprofits, we do need these nonprofits, homeless shelters and things like that, because there are immediate needs that need to be taken care of. Things like providing a safe environment, giving people food, shelter, clothing, offering up some stability and structure. But in addition to just the basic meeting of needs, I would say for these nonprofits, we need to bring in things like psychotherapy. I'm not talking about just counseling services where you just sit and listen, but really digging in to people's problems and helping them change. Yeah. And what you need to do is place expectations and accountability on people. And I'll tell you a story about the Durham Rescue Mission in Durham, North Carolina. Not a perfect place, but it is a structured environment, and they have very strict rules for you to be there. For you to remain in that place, you have to want to change and better your situation. And they put that structured environment on you. They impose rules. They make you work there at the facility. They're doing a lot of good. Obviously, I'm telling this story. You may come back and go, I know about this person that was abused there. Yeah, it could have happened. It happened at the Auburn place. Things like that do happen because, again, you've got bad agents operating everywhere in society. But in general, I like what the Durham Rescue Mission is doing, and they are really trying to help. So nonprofits, that would be my goal. And then for the government, what do we do with them? You know, as citizens, I would just ask for transparency from the government. They need to be communicating the scope of the problem when it comes to poverty. Where are the tax dollars being spent? And then we need external oversight on these government agencies to say, okay, no more sacred cows. We're not just going to keep pumping money into this agency because it's been there for 30, 40, 50 years. We need a body that has authority to make changes to these government agencies. And the reason, we need to move tax dollars over to things that help. Again, our mentality needs to be, are we helping? Are we perpetuating? What are we doing here? Are we accomplishing the mission? And this gets back into leadership. What's the purpose of leadership? 100% first priority of leadership, mission accomplishment. Are we doing that? And then the question pops into my head, should we fund these non-government organizations with tax dollars? I don't know. And I don't have an answer for that because there is a danger of political agendas being inserted in this when you start taking tax dollars and putting them places, because the people that are writing those checks could be following their ideology, and they could fall into one of these two camps where they're like, okay, we're going to restrict money, or yeah, we're going to give money and just keep giving and giving and giving, even though it's not accomplishing the mission.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. People stop charitable giving if they think the government is paying for things. Just a funny story. Talked to a German guy here in America, and he was accustomed to the government just doing everything. So to him, talking about charity here in America, it was nonsensical because he was just accustomed to the government taking care of everything, including the poor. You have to realize Americans, we're very generous in our giving. When tragedies happen, people just start giving their money because they want to help. And so when we talk about non-government organizations, should we fund those with tax dollars? Maybe not. I don't know. If we do, maybe the president could run this nationwide telethon to raise money, for helping the homeless or the poor, or even our defense department. We need more bombs and bullets. I'm joking. But should we fund that? No. This is my takeaway here. As an individual, our mindset needs to be, are we helping? Are we hurting? Or are we just perpetuating the problem? And so I think we need to make demands of any organization that we're associating ourselves with, whether it's non-government or whether it's the government. Just start asking questions. And then I would not participate in scenarios where you're not actually helping, because we really want to help people. And just thinking about the individual in poverty, people are coming out of poverty here in America. And maybe they're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, maybe not. In most cases, you need somebody as an individual to come speak to you. If you're in poverty, you need someone at a minimum to just come alongside and say, you know what? Yeah, this stinks. It's not cool that you were born into this situation. Yeah, you're poor. You live in a trailer park. You live in public housing or wherever you are, and you're surrounded by this bad stuff. It's not good. But hey, there is a way out. And helping those people change the mindset, get them out of the bitterness and resentment, and then do basic stuff like help them graduate from high school, help them go to college. And does that take money? No, I think it takes a change of mindset, because that's what happened with me. This guy, Bill Kamen, who didn't have much money, he was poor too, but he just spoke to me and started regarding me as, yeah, well, when you go to college. That is so powerful. And so I think the solution to poverty and getting people out of these poverty traps, it's not government. Government's perpetuating the problem, especially with the gambling. It's going to take charitable individuals dedicating their time and resources to things that work. So in your area, do stuff that works. Is it something like participating in the foster care program? I know a local pastor in this area, he and his wife, they've brought in a lot of kids over the years in the foster care system. And yeah, they're getting paid. There is money that comes with that, but that's not their motivation. They're legit trying to help these kids. And they've adopted some of these kids themselves. And some of them, it didn't take. It's tragic. And I think about one of the girls that they took in. She ended up aging out of the foster care system, and she ended up getting moved up to New York or something like that. So it may not have been New York, but she got moved out of state, and she ended up in a bad situation. She ended up on drugs. She ended up dying. So she's very young and dies. So there is no happy ending, rainbow type thing in a lot of these cases. But as a charitable individual, there are things you can do to help on the individual level, instead of just regarding as, well, the government should do something. It's up to us. We've got to be leaders in this space. And in most cases, it's just a matter of interacting with people, helping to change the mindset. That's my take on it. That's my viewpoint. I hope that helps someone as we go through this cluttered path of life.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that, James?
Yeah, I think encouraging and setting expectations and meeting people where they're at is huge. Government programs and NGOs and everybody else can be a part of that. But I think there needs to be a better look at the goals and objectives and saying, are we meeting them with those things, or are there better ways?
Right.
Because something interesting about college, growing up poor, I remember from a young age, it's like it was always expected that I was going to college.
Right. Yeah. That's cool, man. Because my dad was like, college? Why don't you get your job done at the plant?
Yeah.
But when I went to college, they were all like, oh, cool. I am thankful. Well, that wraps it up for today. So we looked at Dasani's story. We talked about the poverty traps that even here in affluent America we face. And we covered some of the differing camps on how we can solve these problems. Truth is, there's no easy solution. But as an individual, you can step up and you can make a difference in somebody's life It takes individual leadership and people taking ownership and having a heart for other people and stepping in to make a difference. But then also taking a look at what you're doing and asking that question. Am I helping? Am I hindering? Am I perpetuating the problem? So that's my take on it. So thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks a lot, James. Have a good one, brother.
Take care. Have a good one.